Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Robert Foye. He's the CEO of Accolade Wines, a global wine powerhouse headquartered in Australia and owned by a leading private equity group, Carlye. It's good to see you there. You down in Melbourne?
Absolutely. Good to be here. It's about 10 o'clock.
10 p.m. there. I'm just waking up. What is going on? You guys back down in lockdown?
Yeah, everything was pretty much under control here in Victoria, and then there was a spread coming out of some of the hotels, and that got a little bit out of control of people coming in from outside the country. And now we're back in lockdown for about another 5 weeks. So we're kind of week 2 now, and everything seems to become more under control, but we're trying to get through it.
Yeah. What's the what season are you in down there? We're in summer here.
Actually, it's interesting you asked that. This is my first time to be in winter in July and August, so it's a little bit of an adjustment.
Merry Christmas.
When I talk to my family in Houston, it's over 100 degrees there right now.
Yeah, our viewers will quickly notice you don't have an Australian accent. How did you end up down there? You recently just became the CEO of Accolade.
Yeah, that's right. I actually am originally from Texas, and I spent a long international career with the Coca-Cola Company in Hong Kong, London, Indonesia, and China. And when I was in China, I had the opportunity to work for another Australian wine company and joined them for 5 years.
That's right. I get it. Now I get it. The muscle memory. Yes. So this explains your muddled accent too, which I get a lot. Everyone thinks I'm from Nebraska, which no one has an accent there. So Accolade is interesting company, larger than I thought, over 70 brands, 50 vineyards. Can you give us an overview of the size and scope of what you've built there?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually the number one Australian, New Zealand wine company in terms of volume of product made from Australia and New Zealand.
Oh.
And we've been around since 1836 with the Hortons brand from Western Australia. We also own Hardy's, which is 1853. We own Grant Burge, St. Hallett, Petaluma. We own a New Zealand brand named Mudhouse. We actually have an Italian brand named DeLuca, a U.S. brand named Echo Falls, and Anaquena from Chile. But what's really interesting, if you look at wine across the globe, there's only 2 companies that have 2 of the top 10 largest brands in the world. And one of them is us, with Hardy's and Echo Falls, and the other is Gallo. So quite an interesting company. We are global, and we've got a great global footprint, and we're starting to run the company more like an FMCG and more like a startup, moving fast, expanding fast. And there's a couple markets that, we're number 2 in the Australian market. We're number 1 in the UK market in terms of wine. But there's a couple markets, China and US, which are the 2 largest wine markets in the world that we have not tapped yet, and we are now tapping.
Oh, wow. So then they're both massive if you're just starting there. US being the biggest premium wine stop in the world, and China apparently the biggest red wine, or at least that's their biggest seller, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the US is the number 1 premium wine market in the world. They love Australian wine.
Which one is your premium of all those brands?
Yeah, actually, Grant Burge and St. Hallett, they both come from Barossa Valley.
Nice.
They have some wines that go up to $400 or $500 a bottle. Nice. Petaluma is our premium cool climate wine from Adelaide Hills and from South Australia. And then Hardy's, of course, I mentioned 1853, incredible history, and that wine has quite a few different types of price points, but has wine also that's $500 a bottle, some of it.
Yeah, so you mentioned fast-moving consumer goods, FMCG, for viewers that don't track all that retail stuff. acting like that or acting like a startup. I would tend to say act more like a startup, which is good, but you need to do mass scale distribution, right? It's like coming into China and coming into the US, or those are no small feats. Need some capital for that. And how's that all going to go?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, what we do is we find the right partners. In the US, we've got Quintessential, who's our distribution partner. They've been in that market a long time. We just signed that.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
So, absolutely. And then in China, we actually have a wholesale network. We sell direct also to the big accounts. And we have a couple Chinese partners. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the thing for us is we want to be like a startup. We want to innovate incredibly fast. We want to always be connected to the customer and the consumer. And that was one of the fascinations I had getting into wine, coming from, kind of your standard FMCG company, not standard. Coca-Cola is a great company, but applying all of those customer commercial innovation skills to the wine business. It's been fascinating. I couldn't be having more fun right now.
Yeah, wine is a fascinating industry. It's, I don't know, over 8,000 years old. That's probably longer than most S&P companies. But it's unlike spirits and beer. It's like there's so much talk about it and intrigue and, not just the history, but just people, they tend to talk about wine when they are drinking it or talking about drinking it. And during the pandemic, we've noticed and been measuring lots of things with the Revive indexes, just about how, at least in the U.S., alcohol consumption way off the charts. But interestingly, wine has really picked up as a category. I think at one point, wine.com was sending out 50,000 bottles of wine a day here. So all types of directions we can go in this conversation. But maybe let's just start with the, why do people love wine so much? It used to be kind of like a very niche type of drink back in the, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, I think you almost have to start with what is it about wine that people don't like?
Yeah.
I think first of all, you mentioned it, the history. I think wine has been around pretty much since the beginning of civilization when people started making wine. And I have a saying that Jesus turned water into wine, not Coca-Cola, which is very interesting, right? But yeah. I think more than that, wine is human. And I think when people drink wine together, they think about where does the wine come from? They know it has to come from a certain area. It comes from the ground. It comes from grapes. It comes from incredibly old vines sometimes. But also the human connection. And I think one of the things that makes wine even more interesting than anything else is the connection with food. And there's just absolutely nothing better than to have a nice bottle of wine, and preferably one of our brands, of course, with an incredible meal with your spouse, with your significant other, with your friend, with a colleague. And I think your conversations and the way you feel about the meal and each other is enhanced. And I think that's the real interesting thing about wine.
Yeah, and it seems like it's more of a shared experience. And in our digital world of ones and zeros, you're either on or you're off. And then in alcohol and spirits, it's very much a formulaic, consistent. Wine brings you completely the opposite. It's just it's going to be different every time. And that throws off a lot of people, really. They're like, huh? Can't I just buy the same thing? So speaking of those people, how are you going after millennials and Gen X, Y, Z, and what? Obviously, that's where the next phase of your growth is going to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So millennials are fascinating because they're looking after new experiences. They're adventuresome. I think they have a little bit less link to tradition and history. They're looking for incredible taste. They're looking for, exciting, creative packaging. So if you kind of either explain the heritage to them and why something has a lot of history and quality in it and the winemaking techniques, they can be interested in that for sure. But there's another route, which is look at this incredible packaging. look at this brand, it's exciting, and we've blended this wine exactly how you want it to taste with, with your meal or while you're enjoying it with someone. So we actually, in everything we do, as we innovate, we use a millennial lens in that, and we just kind of started that, and we're getting better at it. But it's something that we're really going to drive, and we have a couple brands like Jam Shed and Madame Sass, which are targeted exactly at millennials, and and they're kind of wild names. But
I love your brand names; they're just all over the place.
Yeah, but they're incredible products, and you look at them and like, I want to try that. I got to try that Madame Sass, or I got to try that Jam Shed.
They kind of capture the feeling of the wine. I mean, it might be a marketing ploy, but not really. Like DeLuca, that sounds pretty sophisticated to me. Italian wines are, Italian wines. I'm Italian, but they don't get a lot of play in countries I've been to, and in the States, people don't think of Italian wines. They used to only think of French wines. Then California obviously took off in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So you have one in Italy? Is that a big vineyard, or what's that all about?
Yeah, we actually source that wine from different places in Italy.
Yep.
It's called DeLuca, and that's one of the wines we're going to be taking to the United States big time. So you'll start seeing that over the next kind of 3 to 6 months.
Nice.
You'll see it everywhere. But Italian wine, I think the issue has just been that it can be quite complicated. And I think that kind of frightens the consumer. And if you look at what we've done with DeLuca, we've made it very approachable. Again, we're blending the wine to taste great, and we're using that millennial lens and trying to get the right product. And I think, that'll be another one of our offers, just like our Chilean brand. It'll be great.
And how do you, it sounds like this was, especially if Carlye was involved, this platform that you have is a roll-up of a lot of different companies. And you hear a lot about, at least as a growth and innovation guy, some premiums that are paid for spirits companies. So, whether it's Diageo or it's Beam Suntory, they're paying some pretty, good multiples to buy startup spirits and, beer companies and flavored drinks and all types of stuff. Pretty hefty valuations, really, for the industry. You don't hear as much about that with wine. Is just because you guys keep it quiet? It's not obviously those two are very public companies, but and my point of my question is, I'm really trying to get into growth and innovation. Do you build it yourself? Do you buy it, acquire, or do you actually borrow, as we talk a lot about in this program, partnering with other companies to do different things? So what's your strategy been there?
Yeah, I think for us it's a mix, but I think why you don't see that in wine as much is a couple reasons. One is it's very fragmented. Most of the time, our leading market share would be a place like the UK, where we have a 20 share. Here in Australia, we might have a 10 or 12 share. And
wow, I thought you have a 50 share down there.
No, wine's much more fragmented, but remember,
a lot of families too, right?
Yeah, but there's value in wine, and I think Carlyle paid a good price for this business, and I think there were really two key things to do. One is get the right management team, and we've done that. So now we have a very, very strong management team, Australia, Asia, Europe, and the Americas, including the US. And the second one was really untap those markets that we talked about, but with a real focus on Asia growth as well. And in Asia, this, 2/3 of the global population's in Asia. The Chinese buy 40% of the luxury goods in the whole world. So that's a big opportunity for us. And then, as we discussed, the U.S., we've got some of the greatest wines in the world, and it's the most premium wine market in the world. Those two things come together, and it's magic. But what we've missed in the past is having an operator in the market who really knew how to drive the business, and that's what we've got now. So we couldn't be more excited about the growth trajectory of this business. And I think, in 3 to 4 years, we'll be a great contender to either do an IPO and become, the biggest or the second biggest global public wine company in the world, or to potentially sell the business, to a private owner. So we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah, when you look at, acquiring other brands, let's just call them, for your portfolio. It's interesting because I know a lot of these people, they're family businesses. They're, whether it's David Deodato, very premium wines out in Napa, or some of the other smaller vineyards. It's I think that's kind of a fascinating thing. Is that why you keep each brand separate, right? Because it's, people kind of feel attached to a little bit to, I mean, there's power shoppers in grocery stores that are looking for the 10% off in the 6-pack in the States. So they are wine price shoppers.
Yeah.
They know they like Chardonnay, and but she pretty much waits till she gets to the store to see what they're pushing. And I don't know about your countries, but that you're in, but in the States, there are a lot of price conscious wine shoppers, not necessarily cheap wines, but they're in the mid cap, let's just call them, I don't know, $20 to $40 range, where the signs are like $10 off, and they gravitate to that aisle. And next thing I know, their cart is filled with, at least not a case, but it's like half a case kind of shoppers.
Yeah. I mean, for us, the brand is absolutely important. And I think it goes back to what you said before, which is, the market's fragmented. And when a consumer finds a brand of wine where you over deliver the quality for the price point, right, and you do that consistently, and they also know, even in the same brand, if you have a $20 bottle of $20 bottle of wine, and then you have a $50 bottle of wine, you can have those under the same brand. And
it confuses them so much. I know. And it's just like, wait a minute, the label's the same as, I'm like, yeah, but look at the year here. This is a very different vintage. Yeah. They're like, this is too complicated. I'm out of here. You're right. It's overwhelming in the store aisles, at least over here. I don't know what it's like. And when I'm in the UK, it's not as insane as it is in the States with, massive either liquor stores or grocery stores, depending on the state you're in.
And actually that builds into something else, Dean, which is, we've got some data which says that over 85% of the purchase intent or the purchase decision of the consumer is in the store. And that's where our background of our team of driving in-store distribution, and how do you look in store, and what does the label look like, and what does the package look like, and how can you really excite the consumer there? That's going to be our game. And if you look at some of the other winemakers in the business, I don't think they come from that perspective. And we actually mix the best of both, because we have the most amazing, like I said, brands from 1836 and 1853. We've got the most amazing winemaking. We're using the latest technologies on how to make, blend the wine and make it absolutely, delight and surprise your mouth when you drink it. So if we mix that with this in-store capability and really letting the consumer know what we have, we can break through all that fragmentation, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, that's where your FMCG backgrounds, your team really come into play. You're right. Most of the smaller independent brands, even some of the larger ones, they can't afford to do all the in-store stuff, and they don't have the expertise. They typically will hire an agency or something like that. Switching to kind of health and wellness, can we go into that a little bit? So, at Revive, the host of this program, there's a lot of focus right now, especially with 2020, just pandemic stuff going on, to focus more on, nurturing your health and whether it's, skincare or hair care, or just what you're eating and supplements and good food. And is that good for wine versus spirits and beer? Is that, we don't talk a lot about the beverage side. Everyone's focused on food and supplements and, what you can make yourself either look better or feel better, or control your weight, or whatever the issue is. Where do beverages fit into this?
Well, it fits into wine perfectly, and there's a couple things that
maybe that's why you left Coca-Cola.
No, I mean
sugar water. Sorry.
I think the first thing about wine is, everyone knows a glass or two of wine is healthy. I mean, it comes from a grape, comes naturally, through agriculture. Wine has certain things in it that are, great for your skin and great for everything. And then in the industry, we're taking on those health needs of the consumer, and we're coming out with things like wine spritzers in a can. We just launched Echo Falls wine spritzer in a can in the UK, and it's got it's got 69 calories. It's 4 or 5% alcohol, very low alcohol. Tastes incredible. And that's another product that millennials will like. They love new packages. They like cans. They like smaller bottles, all that kind of stuff. We got a wine brand named Mudhouse from New Zealand, which is an incredible Sauvignon Blanc, and we are almost in the last stages of making it vegan, and claiming that on the package. So we're looking at low calorie, we're looking at vegan, we're looking at organic, all these types of things, and that all plays in. But the best part about wine is a glass or two is healthy to start with, which is great.
Yeah, and even your doctor says so. So there's a good excuse to get started. But I will show you advertisements from the 60s where or maybe it's 50s. I'm kind of a business historian where doctors are saying cigarettes are safe too, which is I always found those ads to be hilarious. Anyway, what other kind of big opportunities or threats do you see? You're placing some big bets here. I mean, for instance, the States. That product you brought to the UK will be a huge hit here. People just love, I call them the fizzy drinks. I would put a few cases of that on my boat, and on a hot day they'd be gone in 2 hours. I bet.
Well, I'll send you a case for sure. I think, to be honest, our biggest threat or issue is just patience and time. I think we've got an incredible team. I think this thing's going to take off. I actually think we have the best global team in wine in the world, and it's a very capable team. And I think in 2 or 3 years we'll have the best, one of the top 2 or 3 in alcohol. But the other thing that I think has popped up recently, and I learned a long time ago, only control things that you can control and don't worry about things you can't control. But trade and tariffs have certainly popped up. They've popped up in the U.S. from Europe, and recently there's been some discussions in China about higher tariffs and things like that. But again, whenever I see that as a short-term issue, maybe a medium-term issue, but not a long-term issue. And so we just focus on the business. Let's build the brands. Let's build the route to market. Let's get the distribution. And another benefit of having a global wine business, which a lot of wine businesses don't have, is we can be diversified. If a tariff goes up in one place, we can sell more in another.
Or bring in it from another that's more tariff friendly. What about having companies here in the U.S. though? I mean, if you're looking at the 10-year window here, that's obviously on the table.
Yeah, it definitely is on the table. And what we want to do is we want to set up our team there, really drive the business and get our brands well distributed. And then we're going to look at buying a couple potentially U.S. brands, premium brands, not kind of low price money.
Yeah, absolutely. Those you can import. You've got that pretty much cornered.
Yeah. And I think long term also, even in China, there will be a big appetite for premium U.S. brands in China. Again, you've got a tariff situation there that's not great for the short term. But
I mean, why is that? They don't make a lot of their wines there. So why they tariff them? Because that's just opportunistic, or this isn't a geopolitical show, but I just opened up a can of worms. Go ahead.
I think there's always more things behind tariffs than just economics. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you can.
Yeah,
it's So what? Why do they like red wine so much in China? It's massive over there. It's white because they make rice wine for years, centuries probably, which is mostly white wine.
No, that's a very good question. I think what happened was when the Chinese really started making wine and getting into kind of more international wine, then a lot of the local Chinese wine companies and alcohol companies started making red wine. And now China is the largest red wine market in the world. And as you know, I mean, the middle class has grown there by hundreds of millions of people over the last, 5, 10, 15 years. Right. And they want experiences. They want travel. They want to learn about the world. And one of the things that I learned, because, having a portfolio from all over the world, one of the things I've learned is that Australian wine is uniquely an opportunity in China. One, because of geographically we're closer than some other countries, but more
Right.
importantly, the taste profile of Australian wine, which is quite fruit forward and quite smooth and balanced and maybe a little bit sweet, you might say, because of the fruit forward. The Chinese love it.
What does that mean?
It means that when you drink it, the taste just naturally kind of comes on your mouth, and you get more of the fruit flavor and the grape flavor.
Right.
All natural, of course, but it just fits with the Chinese palate. And I think when you go to kind of some of the older world wines, they can be a bit more bitter and a bit harder to learn how to drink. And also, the travel between China and Australia is great, and obviously people know the climate and the environment in Australia is amazing, as well as New Zealand and Tasmania as part of Australia. So we've got a big opportunity in China. So it's great for our wines. And I actually said once, and I still believe this, that 20 years from now, there probably won't be enough premium red wine in the world to satisfy China's thirst.
Yeah. So speaking of, I don't know why people call these emerging markets, because they've arrived a long time ago. But let's move to India. No one talks about India and alcohol consumption that in a lot of the conversations I have. Do you see that as they're obviously more health conscious as a big wine market over the next decade?
Totally. We actually just added a guy. His name's Pushkar. He's actually originally from India, but he lives in Indonesia. And we have put him in place to develop the India market. And, the issue with India is that the wine market right now is smaller because the spirits market is so big. So it'd be much, much smaller market than, say, China, obviously. It is growing, and there's a huge opportunity. And then each region in India has its own kind of laws and label laws. So it's not actually one tariffs. It's not really one market. No. But I think there's opportunities there for us, and we're definitely going to develop it. And we might even local bottle there at some point. And we're definitely developing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we're definitely developing the e-commerce side of it, which is also exciting.
Yeah, whenever I go over there and we have, big long dinner, I'm always surprised the amount of like brown alcohol consumption that's going on. I always thought it would be wine. And they're a lot of these people I know they're connoisseurs of it. They know more than I do about how to select each one and the aging of it. Very different from vodka, which is just more, as I said before, a little bit more mechanical and consistent. So yeah, it's interesting because it's just population-wise much bigger than the United States, but just a longer tail to get there probably.
Absolutely, it's a rum and whiskey market. But here again, you go to millennials, and that's where you're going to see the shift. Millennials, while they'll have some of the traditions of their parents and of the history, they'll also be much more open to try new things. And as they travel and the internet and everything else, wine is going to be something they get interested in.
Yeah. Can we shift to other substances in the States? There's no consistent policy around this, but state by state, we're legalizing things like marijuana and all types of other things. And I spent a lot of time living in Colorado as well as Chicago. So the difference between the two, Illinois just legalizing this year versus Colorado, they've been high for a while. And you mentioned food pairing, so I just can't resist. But yeah, wine and marijuana pairing is that a thing?
Yeah, not really for us, I don't think, and definitely not in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But you bring up a good point.
But they're doing it, is my point, as consumers.
Yeah,
I've been to these parties.
Yeah, they are. I think it's a smaller market with a bit more hype than people think, probably.
That's polite. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a polite way of saying it. But you bring up a good point, which is there are other things like spiked seltzer, craft spirits that we definitely will be looking at as we go. And I think this, the largest alcohol in the world is Chinese baijiu. And Multi is the largest capitalized valuation of any alcohol company in the world. So that's another alcohol that we'd like to look at in the future. But we want to get our house in order. We want to get our incredible brands around the world, and then we'll start to kind of expand in these other things.
But yeah, and you're spot on. That's why I brought it up. At Carlye, we teach a lot of these brands to, how do you bring new products to the market? One of the strategies is it's this plus this, so that's how you get wine, seltzer, and that's how you get all these different mashup types of products. It seems like the wine and spirits and food and whatever substance space has some opportunities there. And we're already seeing it in some cases. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you probably don't know this, but we have the largest wine production facility in Bristol. It's called The Park.
Wow.
It's a 30 million case facility in terms of its capacity. And that's where we're making that Echo Falls wine spritzer. And that's where we're going to make our first spiked seltzer. So, you're absolutely right. It's trying new things. We're not afraid to fail. We're not afraid to make mistakes or do something and it doesn't quite work. That's the kind of culture that we're building. As long as we think it through, do it with speed, and learn from it. So that's what all those kinds of products will come out.
Perfect. Robert, I really want to thank you for being on the Reboot Chronicles. Any parting words of wisdom for our viewers around the world, both corporate and startup people and individual people that are interested in your brands, of course, but just on the business side, you've done a lot. You've been kind of like a Renaissance man, and I definitely think you've found your sweet spot here. But any parting words of wisdom?
Yeah, my parting words of wisdom is two things. One is get the right team, because it's all about the people, and when you get the right team, you can do absolutely magical things. And the second thing is don't be afraid to fail. I've failed a few times in my career with different things, but it's made me stronger, and I couldn't be more excited about our future at Accolade Wines. And thanks for having me. This has been fabulous.
Perfect. And I say this with all sincerity. Cheers.
Cheers to you too.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Dean.
Take care.
Bye-bye.